and welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth, the show that focuses on value. I'm Judith West, and our guest today is James Stovall, CEO, co-CEO, right, of Victory Schools. Hi, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, absolutely, a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so you're CEO of Victory Schools. What is Victory Schools?
Victory Schools is a charter school management firm that has 19 schools in 3 states. We actually help community groups start charter schools across the country.
And you run your own?
Yes. Well, we actually don't run our own schools. We are not the owner of the school, but we actually work for community groups that want to start a charter school.
Okay, but were you not responsible, Victory Schools, for the first charter school?
That's absolutely in New York State.
In New York State.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that was kind of a momentous occasion.
Absolutely.
Your founder, I met your founder, Steve Klinsky.
Great guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where did the notion come to start a charter school?
Well, charter schools actually have existed in New York State since 1999, and Sisulu Walker Charter School of Harlem was the very first charter school to open in the state. Steve had the vision to start a firm that would actually help support community groups who had a vision of starting a charter school in their local communities, their neighborhoods, but didn't necessarily know how to get it done, what the resources would be to take care of it.
Consultant.
Pardon me?
Like a management consultant.
That's correct.
Okay. Tell very briefly. Let's just set the record here. What is a charter school?
A charter school is a public school that's financed with public dollars, tuition free, that's open to all kids, but operates outside of the zone of the traditional public school system.
But there are 2 key differences, and correct me. I think I'm right. For starters, that even though it's publicly funded, all the facility costs are borne by the charter school and not by the taxpayer.
That's an
so
important point.
So in that regard, and that's a point we want to be sure we get on getting your money's worth. That's the one. And number 2, there is a big difference too in the charter. That's why it's called a charter.
Sure.
In the oversight agency of a state.
Yes.
If charter schools don't succeed in a window of 3 years or 5 years?
It's 5 years.
5 years you can.
Yes. They have to be shut down and closed.
And that's a biggie, right?
That is a biggie, and that's actually a biggie for the students and parents, because after all, kids are sent to school to learn, to achieve, and if the school isn't serving them individually or collectively in terms of all the students who attend the school, then the school ought not to exist, whether it's a traditional public school or a charter school.
However, in our history of public education, I never heard of one public school ever being closed for failing its population. Have you?
Well, it's rare occasions. There are some school districts over the years, and particularly over the last couple of years,
that they get taken over. But I think that's all part of this movement of charter schools and some competition.
That's correct.
So tell me something. We are getting our money's worth, aren't we, taxpayers?
Oh,
wasn't there recently a report out by a very well-known Stanford economist, Caroline Huxby?
Sure.
And that kind of set the stage, set the gold standard. There's a cliche around or a buzz around that charter schools skim off the cream of the top.
Sure.
But she sort of disproved that, didn't
Absolutely.
she? Tell us about that.
Yeah, her study actually, which was just published in a lot of national papers, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, basically did a side-by-side comparison of students who applied for a charter school and got in, as well as students who applied for the charter and did not get in. Right. It compared how those kids did academically over the course of a number of years.
So they were similar in that they all had the notion or the initiative to try to get into
That's correct, because one of the knocks against charter school is that, well, they number one cream, and these are parents who are more likely, who are interested in their kids' well-being, and they took the initiative to apply.
Right.
Well, Dr. Huxby's study, threw out those negative connotations about charter school because it proved that same parents who took the initiative to apply to the charter school, their kids, side-by-side comparison-wise, many years later, kids who are in charter school actually are outperforming those kids who unfortunately did not get into charter school. And the interesting thing is kids who actually get into charter school in New York State actually are doing as well as many of them as kids in Scarsdale. So the achievement gap between black and white students is
or in private school.
That's correct.
So let me ask you something, James. In these tough economic times, after all, charter schools are about choice, right?
That's correct.
Right, and after all, Americans, we're hardwired for choice.
That's
correct.
I mean,
if somebody, if somebody told you had to buy General Motors' car, especially now, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that was what the trouble was.
That's right.
But
That's correct.
so in this economic time, parents who are faced with wanting choice, they could consider a charter school as opposed to a pricey private school, couldn't they, James?
That's absolutely why charter schools are such a great value for taxpayers, because many taxpayers across our great city, and in fact across the great state that we have, are paying extraordinary amounts in property taxes, and yet they have poor traditional public school systems, and so they have to, on top of the property taxes, pay for private schools.
Yeah,
charter schools are a way for...
Yeah, you know something, it wasn't only until recently that parents even got the notion that they had a choice.
That's correct. Yeah, you know, because the choice, in fact, did not exist in the public realm for charter schools until 1998, when the charter school law was passed. Right. And when Sosulu came along, for example, in District 5, one of the lowest performing
You were down very low. Is that Harlem?
That's Harlem.
Okay, that's a very low performing district.
Very low performing district. Only 1 in 4 kids were achieving at grade level. I think the New York Times, the New York Post called it a dead zone, one of the educational dead zones. It was just incredible, the amount of disrepair in terms of the students' school district. Since charter schools have come along, that district has increased its rates, as well as charter schools, obviously.
As a matter of fact, didn't your first class, when they graduated as 6th graders, outperform on New York State tests?
That's right.
There's no shortcuts. They have to perform on the same standards as the traditional public schools,
correct?
That's
correct. They're held to the same standards. As we talked earlier, they're getting less money. They have to pay for their own list.
But they have the same gold bar to pass.
Absolutely. And they in fact are passing and exceeding.
All right, so let's talk about what you really do. After all, your first school was in Harlem. This show is national and worldwide, but Harlem is pretty well recognized for what it is, one of the lowest poverty areas in the United States.
That's correct.
Tell me something. What do you do different?
Well, it focuses on...
is there some magic wand?
There is no magic wand.
What is it?
It's hard work. It really starts in the classroom. And most of the studies will show that the key driver in student achievement is selecting a high-quality crackerjack teacher. So, because that's the person who's going to be...
So what do you do? Advertise under C for crackerjack as a T for teacher?
I wish it was that simple. It's not. What we do is actually take some very thoughtful and rigorous approaches to recruiting and attracting the right talent for the job.
Do you pay more money?
In some cases, our schools do pay more money, but it's not often the case. We actually, are on par with the school district, but that's not the chief attraction for kids, teachers to come to our school.
So this management, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to be sure that we get the major points.
Sure.
This management consulting that you do to help the teacher. So one of the things you do is focus on teacher recruitment.
Teacher recruitment.
That's
and then
a very important.
It's the key ingredient.
That's the key. So you start there.
You start there.
What do you look for?
We're looking for people who have achieved in their earlier careers, their earlier lives.
Do you look at their grade point average?
Absolutely. That's
really?
Absolutely.
So potential applicants' grade point average.
We're looking at their grade point average, their SAT scores. We're looking at the college they attended. Those are three little known, right. But important indicators when they're going to be successful.
If they have a degree in education?
No. In fact, most of the research now shows that teachers who come from an education background don't perform as well as.
So if you see a liberal arts major, economics, history, that feels pretty good to you.
Oh, absolutely. We're just looking for smart, hardworking, culturally sensitive, particularly because most of our schools are in urban areas. Well-meaning people who love kids and who want to be trained and developed to improve their lives.
So you're no different really than a business that looks for a human resource department that looks for strong applicants.
Right.
Okay. That's next. What do you?
Right. So principal. You need a great
the person
school
running,
leader.
the CEO.
That's right, of the building. That principal absolutely needs to have experience. They need to understand instruction. They need to be able to multitask. They need to be able to develop teachers. And that's the key ingredient here, because teachers...
The buck stops.
The buck stops with the principal, but teachers need to be developed. right?
And even when you find the best.
Even when you find the best, they need help, training, and support, and that comes in the form of the principal. Okay. Once we've selected the principal, the third key ingredient is to support the school in terms of the operational and financial issues that the school has to deal with.
Is that so different than what the traditional schools do? I mean, it doesn't sound like it.
It's not. But again, the key driver on all this are the people who are involved in the process and the systems.
Is there something there about the atmosphere or the care? Is there something there? There has to be something in the mixture, in the formula, that makes kids perform when they didn't.
Well, you know, it's actually very simple. It boils down to teachers who care about kids, teachers who are supported, very good, firm, strong, well-intentioned leadership. And discipline. And then setting the proper systems in place. In many cases, that would include a longer school day because kids are coming with certain deficiencies, perhaps a longer school year. There's certain curricula that have been proven to get better results with kids.
Right.
But again, it begins with the people in the school.
Are your schools what are your schools K through?
We actually have K to 5s, K to 8s, as well as we have high schools and middle schools. So we do the K to 12 spectrum.
I used to teach. You know, when you ask an adult, most adults, if you ask them, and I've tried this, and I'm sure you will. So, what do you remember about school? Inevitably, the first thing that somebody says is they mention a teacher's name.
That's correct.
They don't talk about the library or how fancy the science lab is or the media lab. They say, I remember Mrs. Jones. She inspired me to read, or I learned math.
It's absolutely correct. In fact,
how do we get so far away from what is, you say, a basic concept?
Well, I don't know that we have in many cases. I'll share with you a story. We actually have at Sasulu a teacher who was there since 1999. She was a phenomenal and is a phenomenal teacher. She actually looped with many of her kids. So she actually began with them in the first grade and kept with them since when they graduated. One of our graduates who is in high school now came back to Sasulu's anniversary, and again, during her speech, she mentioned this teacher by name because this teacher has made such an impact on her. So I'd like to think that we haven't gotten away when the teacher has done the proper job in terms of being there, supporting, and really challenging the kids to get better.
We only have about a minute left, James. Charter schools had a second mission, which was to instill some competition in the system and hopefully help traditional public schools raise the bar. Do you see that happening?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll give you a quick example.
Yes.
In Albany, where about 1 in 4 kids are now in charter schools, the Albany school
25%.
district, 25% are in charter schools, and they're all high performing, quite frankly. So in Albany, the school district didn't have longer school days. Once charter schools came, they extended their school days. In some schools in the traditional Albany school district, they now have extended school years. Students now in the traditional Albany school district now wear uniforms, which mimics what was happening in charter schools. The key point, though, is that students in traditional public schools in Albany are now doing better than they were before charter schools
So I guess it goes back to an old-fashioned American value, too, right? Competition.
Free marketplace.
Free marketplace.
And providing value for taxpayers.
Okay. A good show for getting your money's worth. Thanks for being on.
Thank
I really
you so much for
appreciate it.
having
Thanks for
me.
what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Right. I'm Judith West. We just met with James Stovall, CEO of Victory Academy Schools. Thanks for watching.